Good afternoon, preppers. Welcome to our next edition of Goshen Prepping. I'm glad you're here. We worry about the economy in the United States or whatever country you live in because the economies, honestly, worldwide right now are actually not doing too well. I mean, there are exceptions to that, and I'm going to show you some of those exceptions in just a moment. But it's more than simply just our economy not doing well. But as we actually see America going into a decline, eventually, inevitably, we are going to have a new world order take place in which that country is going to take over and be the economic conglomerate that basically sets it up for a world stage. It's actually happening right now. That's exactly what I want to show you. The first article from the Wall Street Journal: Russia turns to China's yuan in effort to ditch the dollar. Yep, that's what they want to do. Moscow has jettisoned the long-standing concerns about giving China too much leverage over its economy. So in short, Russia used to worry about China getting much bigger than Russia. But right now, Russia, because of the whole situation in Ukraine, they really don't have much of a choice. So they're actually letting China take the lead. But it's not just China and Russia. China and Brazil strike a deal to ditch the dollar for trade. Beijing's latest salvo against the almighty greenback will enable China, the top rival to the U.S. economy, and Brazil, the biggest economy in Latin America, to conduct their massive trade and financial transactions directly without the U.S. dollar. And you may be thinking that, well, who cares? I mean, don't they actually conduct business without the U.S. dollar? Understand, since World War II, practically speaking, the U.S. dollar has been the dominant trade currency worldwide. And what we're seeing here, well, it's starting to disappear as being that major trade currency. And something's going to replace it. Maybe the UN. And when I say UN, I'm not talking about United Nations. We're talking about the Chinese yuan financial currency. Russia and China have been teaming up to reduce reliance on the dollar. And here's how it's going. Just days before Russia's brutal invasion of Ukraine, we were warned that Russia and China's collaboration on de-dollarization, removing the economy's reliance on the US dollar for international trade and finance, because Russia had sanctions and they simply want to make it so they can get through something that's sanction-proof on the Russian economy. In essence, Russia has since pursued alternatives to manage its trade and reserves. Two things: the Chinese yuan and gold have become the stars of the show. The yuan was not the first thing Russia wanted. Russia is dependent on Beijing's goodwill, and Russia did not want that. But gold is not sanction-proof, and Russia's having a hard time getting up to the gold trade. So in essence, Russia is kind of like stuck between a rock and a hard place because the Chinese yuan, they don't want that. They'd rather have gold, but it's not working out. So Russia is now basically bowing down and saying, okay, China, go ahead and take this financial lead using your yuan as the currency, because China's buying a lot of oil from Russia and is actually keeping Russia afloat, at least for the time being. So look at this chart. The de-dollarization in Chinese-Russian trade prior to Ukraine, practically nothing. And then once the invasion began, boom, look at the amount of trade they actually have using not American dollars for this. And we're looking at the appreciation of the yuan compared to the ruble. Before the war, they pretty much had the same exchange rate, plummeted at the beginning, but now the yuan from China is doing very well in comparison to the ruble. And in addition, they are trying to gobble up the gold. You can see the gold reserves Russia has, and after the war, they've got a lot of it. Gold is really becoming the big thing that countries are trying to get again. Okay, so where is all this leading? I've often spoken of BRICS, B-R-I-C-S, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa have joined in a conglomerate. It's been around for a long time. And it's always been just a trade conglomerate. You know, we'll buy spices from India and we'll buy certain things like rice from China, et cetera. I mean, obviously that's being very generic as far as what happens with that. But ever since the pandemic, and especially since the invasion of Ukraine, we've seen BRICS solidify more and more. And they actually now seem determined to take the dollar off the table. And in my opinion, we're seeing a new axis of power developing right in front of our face. It's so much so that they've actually brokered a deal between Saudi Arabia and Iran to actually have peace. That between Sunni and Shiite Muslims, that's a major deal. And they basically are the ones that brokered that, as Saudi Arabia continues to make videos, by the way, look them up on YouTube, videos mocking Biden, mocking the United States too. But I laugh because they're practically mocking Biden. And listen, I wish Biden would succeed. I want our country to succeed. But the things that are happening in our country now are doing nothing less than actually making our economy take a nosedive, as the economy in a lot of ways in China is accelerating. Now, people will argue, and I agree, that China's economy right now is not that great. You're right, it is not that great. But we do see a general trend of the United States dollar on the decline, And we see a general trend of the Chinese yuan going on the rise. When's the switch going to take place? When is the New World Order going to take effect? And I'm not going to simply be a fearmonger and say, oh, we're all doomed. I'm not saying that at all. Because understand that when the United States took the reins of the New World Order from Britain in the 40s, Britain's still around. Britain's still a beautiful, great country with amazing people. But they're no longer the dominant ones for trade in the world. The United States is, but that's just a matter of time, especially the way China is going. I'd love to see your comments below, by the way, your comments on this in the comments below. I'd like to get your input on this to see what you think too, because this is such a big deal. And I'm very curious what you're thinking. Is this something going to happen sooner or later? A couple years ago, I would have said much, much, much later. But that tide is changing now, and I'm not so sure.